It was supposed to be a quiet night at the edge of the county. Just Jess Monroe, a cup of black coffee, and the lull of crickets beyond the battered window of her small ranch house. No visitors came out here, not unless they were lost or running from something they couldn't outrun. Jess preferred it that way. She'd built her world on silence and distance, both from people and her own mistakes, letting her horses fill the gaps that others left behind. But silence shattered in an instant, like glass beneath a boot. The sound came first, a frantic pounding at the old iron gate that divided her property from the wild woods beyond. Not a person, not a vehicle, but hooves, heavy, desperate, echoing into the night. Jess's pulse stuttered, and for a moment she thought she was dreaming, some remnant of old rodeos and lost nights. She set down her coffee and grabbed the flashlight, pulling on her boots, instinct tugging her outside. The moon hung low and swollen above the treetops, bathing everything in silver. At the gate stood a horse unlike any Jess had ever seen, a massive black Andalusian stallion, his mane streaming wild and tangled, eyes flashing white with panic. Even from a distance, Jess saw the bridle, expensive leather, the collar at his neck studded with diamonds, one of them catching the moonlight. The animal's chest and flanks were flecked with something darker than mud. Blood. Jess didn't ask herself whether she should help. She simply acted, opening the gate just enough for the stallion to push through, feeling the hot, ragged breath on her hand. "Easy, big guy," she murmured, her voice steady even as her heart hammered. The horse tossed his head, not out of fear but urgency. It wasn't pain in his eyes, it was warning. Before Jess could examine the wound, the stallion wheeled around and bolted toward the edge of the woods, stopping only to look back, urging her to follow. Jess hesitated just a second. Some primal part of her recognized trouble, the scent of danger on the breeze, old instincts from a life she'd tried to leave behind. But the horse's desperation left no room for doubt. She followed. The woods swallowed her flashlight beam, branches slapping against her arms as she jogged, boots crunching in the loam. The stallion moved ahead with purpose, pausing every few yards to make sure Jess kept up, hooves silent on the leaf-littered ground. After 100 yards or so, the horse stopped abruptly, pawing at the earth. There, huddled beneath a tangle of fallen limbs and moss, was a girl. Young, maybe 19 or 20, face streaked with dirt and tears, eyes wild as a hunted animal. She clutched a necklace to her chest, the pendant glittering even in the weak flashlight glow. Diamonds again, but something about it looked strange, intricate, almost coded. Her arms bore fresh bruises, her lips split, one sleeve torn nearly off at the shoulder. "Please, don't let them find me," the girl choked out, her voice raw. Jess knelt, forcing calm into her movements. "It's okay. You're safe now," she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "My name's Jess. Who are you?" "Lila," the girl whispered, her grip tightening on the necklace. "They're coming. I know they are." A new sound cracked through the forest. Voices, heavy footfalls, and the glint of headlights crawling down the dirt road toward Jess's property. Two men, both dressed in sharp suits, shoes all wrong for the woods. The older one, tall and wolfish with slicked back hair, scanned the darkness with practiced ease. The other, stockier and younger, kept his hand under his jacket, fingers twitching like he was itching for something metallic. "Evening, ma'am," the tall one called out, tone cold as river ice. "We're looking for a runaway and a horse. Seen anything unusual tonight?" Jess straightened, planting herself between the men and Lila, whose breath hitched behind her. "Nothing but the usual," Jess replied, playing dumb. "Just me and my horses." The wolfish man's eyes narrowed, sliding over Jess like he already knew her secrets. That's funny, because this part of the county, nobody comes out here unless they're hiding, or they owe someone. Jess felt the old anger spark in her chest. She refused to move. I think you two need to turn around and leave, now. The stocky man stepped forward, voice oily. We can make it worth your while, Miss Monroe. He pulled a wad of cash from his pocket, flashing it. You help us. You clear some debts. Maybe keep your little ranch out of foreclosure. Jess didn't look at the money. Not interested. Lila, trembling, peeked out from behind Jess, and the tall man's expression shifted. Predator spotting prey. There she is, he snarled, moving fast. Tempest, the stallion, charged, rearing up between Jess and the men, hooves lashing the air. Jess used the chaos, grabbing Lila's hand and shoving her toward the trees. Run, now! Lila hesitated, glancing back. In the moment, she saw Jess standing her ground, facing the men. But as Jess stalled, arguing, Lila's battered mind twisted her protector's actions. Betrayal, she thought. She darted away, deeper into the shadows, the horse bounding after her. Jess felt the older man's hand on her arm, grip bruising. She shoved him back, but he struck, sending her sprawling into the dirt. Pain burst along her ribs, but Jess forced herself to her feet, spitting blood. The headlights retreated, the woods going silent again, but Lila and the horse were gone, vanished into darkness. Jess staggered back toward her house, battered but burning with determination. She'd seen the fear in Lila's eyes, and the promise of danger in those diamond-studded clues. Whatever nightmare had arrived at her door, Jess knew she was in the thick of it now. And there was no turning back. Jess barely made it back to her porch before her legs buckled. The side of her ribcage throbbed from where the man had struck her, and she could already feel the bruises rising under her shirt. The porch light flickered, casting uncertain shadows across the yard. But Jess's mind raced faster than her heart. The name on the taller man's lips, Monroe, still echoed in her ears. How did they know her? How deep did her past reach? She limped inside, bolting the door, checking every window, hand trembling only when she was out of sight. The stallion and the girl, Tempest and Lila, were gone, but the unease lingered, heavy as thunderclouds. Her thoughts spun between the glinting diamonds, the desperate look in Lila's eyes, and those men's thinly veiled threats. Her debts weren't a secret in this county, but she'd never known the kind of people who could turn a late mortgage into blood on a horse's hide. Jess sank onto her old couch, wincing. The adrenaline wore off, leaving aches and exhaustion in its wake. She pressed an ice pack to her side and forced herself to think. Did Lila believe she was betrayed? The way the girl had darted off, panic in every step, suggested a lifetime of disappointment, of running and never looking back. Jess couldn't blame her. Trust, for people like them, was currency more precious than diamonds. She dozed fitfully, the night stretching into uneasy fragments, shouts in the distance, the far-off whinny of a horse, her own name whispered in accusation. She startled awake every hour, expecting headlights to cut across her yard or fists to pound on the door. But morning came quietly, sunlight crawling over the battered wood and painting gold across her cluttered kitchen. Coffee burned her tongue as she sipped, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Nothing but the usual: the fields, the bent fence post, the weathered barn. She tried to push away the memory of those men, but the dread clung to her skin. Just before noon, Jess heard it, a soft scuffing near the barn. She slipped out, cautious, her breath tight in her chest. The doors creaked as she opened them, the smell of hay and sweat flooding her senses. In the shadows, Tempest stood with his head low, flanks still streaked with blood, sides heaving. Beside him, Lila crouched, eyes wide and wild, clutching that jeweled necklace. Jess raised her hands, voice low and calm. "Hey, it's me. You're safe here." Lila stared at her, suspicion hard in her gaze. "Why did you talk to them?" she spat, her voice brittle. Were you going to sell me out?" Jess's face tightened. "No. I was buying time, trying to get you clear." Lila shook her head, refusing to believe. "You hesitated. They knew your name." "They know a lot of things they shouldn't," Jess admitted. Her jaw set. "But I don't work for them. If I did, you wouldn't be here now." Tempest nickered softly, nudging Lila as if to encourage her to listen. Jess took a careful step forward, keeping her hands visible. "You look hurt. Let me help." For a long moment, Lila weighed her options, eyes darting between Jess and the open door. Finally, exhaustion won out. She dropped onto an overturned bucket, tears threatening to spill. "I don't know who to trust. I can't do this alone." Jess knelt in front of her, reaching gently for Lila's injured arm. She pulled out the first aid kit, hands steady. "You're not alone," Jess said, more promise than comfort. As she cleaned the wounds, Jess asked quietly, "Who were those men?" Lila hesitated, then glanced at Tempest. "They work for my stepbrother, Richard. He's after something my father left for me. Those diamonds. There's a code in this necklace. It's the only thing standing between me and them." Jess considered this. "And the horse?" "Tempest belonged to my father," Lila whispered. "He trusted him. And now, he's the only family I have left." Jess gently pressed a bandage to Lila's arm, her mind racing. There was more to this story, more than just greed and blood. She stood, brushing straw from her jeans. "You can stay here, but you need to understand. If those men come back, they won't play nice." Lila nodded, wiping her face. "I'm sorry I ran. Everybody I ever trusted, they turned on me." Jess's voice softened. "That's not how it's going to go this time." A sudden crash outside made both women jump. Jess moved to the window, peering through the crack. It was only a stray cat, bolting across the yard, but the tension didn't ease. "We need to lay low," Jess said. "Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we figure out what that code means." As the afternoon waned, Jess taught Lila how to move quietly around the property, how to slip through the shadows and stay hidden. She doctored Tempest's wounds, discovering a fresh gash near the diamond collar, an expensive tracking device embedded in the leather. Jess pried it loose, pocketing it for later, suspicion mounting. Night fell like a blanket, and the world shrank to the warm glow of the kitchen. Jess and Lila sat at the table, sharing a meal of soup and bread, the silence between them less heavy now. Lila traced the diamond necklace, her hands shaking as she tried to explain the patterns. The numbers engraved so small only a desperate girl would notice. Jess watched her, empathy growing. She saw herself in Lila's haunted eyes, the same distrust, the same stubborn will to survive. "We'll get through this," Jess promised, not knowing exactly how but meaning every word. But outside, beyond the fence line, headlights flickered in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Victor and Tony were circling, drawing closer. And Jess knew the worst was yet to come. Trust was fragile. But for tonight, in the battered sanctuary of Jess's ranch, it was enough to keep the darkness at bay. The darkness outside Jess's ranch pressed in thick and quiet. But for the first time in what felt like years, Jess didn't dread the night. She watched Lila and Tempest in the barn, haloed by the warm glow of an old lantern, The girl sat curled in a nest of hay, Tempest resting his great head in her lap, his breath rising and falling in time with her shaky inhales. Jess found herself pausing in the doorway, just watching, feeling a strange tug in her chest, a mixture of protectiveness and responsibility that surprised her. She locked up tight, double-checking every window and door. Her battered body protested with every step, but she pushed through. There would be no easy rest, not with men like Victor and Tony sniffing around. But for now, her little patch of land felt like a sanctuary, an island in the storm. Jess found Lila picking nervously at a piece of bread Jess had brought out to the barn. The silence between them was brittle, but less icy than before. Jess lowered herself onto an overturned feed bucket, wincing as her ribs reminded her of last night's scuffle. "You two look like you've been running for days," Jess said, keeping her tone soft. "When's the last time you slept?" Lila managed a small, grateful smile. "Tempest hasn't let me stop long enough. I guess he's smarter than me." She stroked the horse's muzzle, and the animal snorted in contentment. "You can trust him," Lila continued almost to herself. "My father said he had a sense for people. Tempest wouldn't have led me here if he didn't think, well, if he didn't think you were good." Jess felt a sting of emotion she didn't dare show. "Smart horse, your Tempest. Got better instincts than most folks I've met." Lila hesitated, then finally let herself relax a fraction. "Why are you helping us? You don't even know me." Jess looked down, tracing circles on the dusty floor with her boot. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Lila. Besides, I know what it's like to be hunted down for things you never chose." She let the words hang there, an unspoken confession. "We've all got ghosts out here." They sat in silence for a while, sharing the warmth of the barn, the easy breathing of horses settling in for the night. Jess busied herself tending to Tempest's wounds, cleaning the dried blood from his coat, and stitching the worst of the cuts. The stallion flinched at first, but soon stilled under Jess's gentle touch. The quiet gave way to small, careful moments, a shared mug of tea, a whispered memory. Lila told Jess about growing up on the move, her stepbrother's cold ambition, and the father who left her the necklace with the promise, "This will keep you safe, if you're smart enough." Jess, in turn, shared only slivers, her failed marriage, a family she no longer spoke to, and the way horses had saved her from herself more than once. Later, as Jess finished bandaging Tempest, Lila spoke in a voice so small Jess almost missed it. "I'm scared, but I want to fight back. I don't want to be afraid anymore." Jess nodded, pressing a hand to Lila's shoulder. "That's the first step, standing your ground." Thunder rumbled far away, and rain began to patter softly against the roof. The sound was almost soothing, a reminder that some things were still ordinary in a world gone mad. Jess led Lila into the house, showing her the tiny guest room, a space mostly filled with horse blankets and old ribbons. But it was warm and safe. Lila hesitated at the door, glancing at Jess. "If you need anything, I'll be right across the hall," Jess said. Lila nodded. "Thank you." Jess collapsed into her own bed, every muscle aching, but found sleep finally came. The rain's steady drumming washed away some of the fear. She woke to pale morning light, the smell of coffee already drifting through the house. For a second, she wondered if it had all been a dream. But then she saw Lila at the table, Tempest's massive head poking through the open window, begging for a carrot. The three of them made a strange picture, an exiled horse trainer, a fugitive heiress, and a diamond-collared stallion with haunted eyes. But Jess felt something new blooming in her chest, a fragile hope. Over breakfast, Lila hesitated, then pushed the diamond necklace across the table. Will you help me figure it out? The code? I can't do it alone. Jess picked it up, studying the tiny, intricate markings on each jewel. We'll figure it out. But first, we need to keep a low profile. Victor and Tony won't stop looking for you. Lila nodded, her eyes clearer now. I know. But I trust you, Jess. Jess smiled, something genuine breaking through her usual reserve. You're tougher than you think, kid. They spent the day quietly, Jess tending to chores around the ranch, Lila sticking close, helping when she could. Tempest followed them everywhere, never letting Lila out of his sight. Jess showed Lila how to move through the back trails, how to spot trouble before it found you. By afternoon, Jess even caught Lila laughing at something Tempest did. A wild, joyous sound that seemed to drive away the shadows for a little while. As dusk approached, the tension returned. Jess sat on the porch with her shotgun across her knees, scanning the tree line. But nothing stirred except the wind. Inside, Lila fell asleep on the couch, the necklace clutched in her fist, Tempest curled up just outside the door. For a brief, precious moment, Jess allowed herself to believe they'd be safe. She knew better, of course. The storm was only paused, not past. But in that fragile lull, with new trust and tentative hope blooming in the battered quiet of her home, Jess felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something worth fighting for. The next morning dawned heavy with mist, a quiet tension thick in the air, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Jess stood by the kitchen sink, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee, eyes fixed on the horizon. The events of the past days played over in her mind. Lila's fear, the blood on Tempest's coat, the sharp faces of Victor and Tony, and underneath it all, the glinting code in that diamond necklace. Lila shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes, Tempest's muddy hoofprints trailing across the porch behind her. Jess gave a small nod, offering the girl a cup of cocoa. Lila accepted it, clutching the warmth in her hands as if she could draw courage from it. For a while they sat in silence, the only sound the rhythmic tap of Tempest's tail against the door. Eventually, Jess broke the quiet. You said there's a code in that necklace. How do you know? Lila's eyes flickered, haunted by memories she wasn't sure how to share. My father was paranoid. He never trusted Richard, my stepbrother. Before he died, he gave me the necklace and said, "Everything you need is here. Trust only the horse and trust your instincts." I thought he was just being overprotective, until things started to go wrong. Jess turned the necklace over in her hands, examining the tiny inscriptions between the diamonds. Did he ever say what kind of code? Numbers, letters, something else? Numbers, I think, Lila replied. I noticed they're arranged like dates, or maybe coordinates. I've been trying to figure it out, but... She trailed off, shame coloring her cheeks. Richard found out. That's when everything went crazy. Tempest and I barely made it out. Jess's heart clenched at the desperation in Lila's voice. She reached over, squeezing the girl's hand. We'll figure this out. Together. They spent the next hour hunched over the kitchen table, Jess's old reading lamp illuminating the delicate chain. Lila pulled out a scrap of paper, covered in frantic notes and half-deciphered patterns. The numbers etched on the diamonds were too perfect to be random, maybe bank accounts or a safe deposit box. Jess's mind churned through possibilities. The code could open a door, or it could open a trap. Tempest watched them through the window, eyes calm but alert. Every so often, he'd stomp a hoof or nicker softly, as if urging them on. Jess couldn't help but wonder what secrets the stallion carried, how much he had seen, and what he'd protected Lila from. As the morning stretched into afternoon, progress came in fits and starts. Jess's patience and quiet logic steadied Lila's frantic energy. Piece by piece, they matched numbers to addresses, finding a pattern hidden in plain sight. A string of post office box numbers stretching across 3 nearby towns. It was the kind of trick only someone who'd spent a life running would dream up, scattering clues in the open, counting on fear to keep people away. Lila's eyes widened as realization dawned. He left the inheritance, whatever it is, in pieces. We need to go to these towns. But if Richard is watching... Jess nodded, her mouth set in a hard line. We'll have to be careful, and we can't go all at once. That's what they'll expect. The reality of it all hit Lila like a wave. She leaned back in her chair, hands shaking, a tear slipping free. I'm so tired, Jess. I just want it to be over. Jess looked at the girl, saw the exhaustion, the grief, and the stubborn spark that wouldn't quite go out. We can do this. I've spent my whole life running from things that scared me, but not anymore. We face this, together. For the first time, a tentative smile played at Lila's lips. Thank you. As dusk settled, Jess led Lila out to the paddock. The fresh air worked wonders. Tempest trotted in circles, still limping slightly but stronger, his coat slowly regaining its shine. Jess showed Lila how to care for him, how to clean his wounds, brush his mane, and feed him treats from her hand. The simple work built trust between them. For a while, they were just 2 women and a horse, safe behind a wall of trees and twilight. Later, Jess dug out an old map, spreading it across the hood of her battered truck. She traced the route to each post office box, memorizing every turnoff, every back road. Lila leaned over her shoulder, the last glow of sun illuminating their faces. If we do this, we have to move fast, Jess said. No phone calls, no credit cards, cash only, in and out. Lila nodded, determination finally sparking in her eyes. I can do that. Night crept in, bringing the familiar chill and the distant chorus of coyotes. Jess locked up tight, checking the windows and doors twice. She left a loaded shotgun by the bed, old habits refusing to die. Lila curled up on the couch, Tempest sleeping outside beneath the window. The house felt less like a fortress and more like a home, a fragile bubble of safety on the edge of danger. Before drifting off, Jess watched the moon through the window, thoughts racing. She knew the danger wasn't past. If anything, it was closer than ever. But for the first time in a long time, she felt hope flicker, a sense that maybe, just maybe, there was a way through this. And as she listened to Lila's steady breathing and Tempest's deep, gentle snorts outside, Jess vowed to see it through, no matter what darkness waited on the other side of dawn. The next day began with a nervous kind of hope. Jess, Lila, and Tempest prepared as best they could, planning every detail of their first trip to one of the post office boxes the coded necklace had pointed them toward. The night before, they'd memorized routes, rehearsed escape plans, and filled Jess's old pickup with enough gas, water, and oats for the horse to last, in case they had to run. Even in the rush of fear, a spark of excitement glimmered. Could this be the day everything turned around? Lila wore her hair tucked under a baseball cap, a backpack slung over one shoulder. Jess made sure her own jacket concealed the small pistol she hadn't touched in years. Before they left, Jess spent a quiet moment with Tempest, brushing his coat and whispering promises into his ear. You keep her safe, Jess said, and Tempest nuzzled her hand in silent understanding. They left before sunrise, shadows stretching long across the fields. the world painted in ghostly blue. Jess drove, hands tight on the wheel, eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror. Lila sat beside her, clutching the necklace in one fist and Tempest's lead rope in the other. The town was quiet at dawn, the post office a lonely box of light on Main Street. Jess parked in the alley behind the building, making sure no one watched. "In and out," she whispered. Lila nodded and slipped out, heart pounding, footsteps echoing in the empty morning. Inside, the post office was nearly deserted. The clerk, half asleep, barely glanced up as Lila slid the key into the box and turned it. There, inside, was a small envelope. No markings, just her name printed in her father's familiar scrawl. Lila's hands shook as she pulled it out. For a moment, she felt weightless with relief. This was it. This was proof her father had meant for her to find the inheritance, proof she hadn't imagined the danger. But as she left the building, envelope clutched tight, a black SUV cruised slowly down the street. Lila's stomach twisted, the tinted windows rolled down, and Victor's wolfish face appeared, eyes glittering. "Hey, princess, miss us?" She turned and ran, boots pounding the sidewalk, Jess's truck already roaring to life at the curb. Jess threw the door open, and Lila tumbled inside, breathless. "They're here! Go!" Jess gunned the engine, tires screeching as they peeled away. The SUV followed, headlights blazing. Lila ducked low, clutching the envelope to her chest, as Jess took back roads, twisting through alleys and dirt lanes. Tempest whinnied in the back of the truck, picking up on their fear, stomping his hooves against the metal floor. They reached the ranch with minutes to spare, Jess's hands shaking as she parked the truck behind the barn. She ushered Lila and Tempest inside, heart hammering. "Get the doors, now!" But it was too late. As they rushed into the barn, another car appeared in the driveway. Tony behind the wheel, Victor beside him, both stepping out with ugly, confident smiles. Jess's blood ran cold. The GPS tracker. Of course. The diamond collar. They'd missed something, some hidden chip or signal. And now the men were here, grinning in the late morning light. Victor strode forward, voice slick with triumph. "You know, Jess, you really should check your gear better. Technology's come a long way since the old days." Jess braced herself, body tense, shielding Lila and Tempest with her own. "You don't belong here," she said through gritted teeth. Tony stepped in, gun drawn, leveling it at Jess. "Let's keep this simple, yeah? Give us the girl, give us the horse, and nobody gets hurt." Lila's whole body trembled. Jess felt the anger rise in her throat, but she didn't move. "Over my dead body," Victor snorted. "That can be arranged." The barn erupted in chaos. Jess lunged, grabbing a shovel and swinging it at Tony, who fired a shot wide into the dirt. Tempest reared, hooves lashing out, sending hay flying and filling the barn with thunderous noise. Lila tried to run, but Victor grabbed her arm, yanking her back. Jess fought wildly, refusing to let go, but a blow to the head sent her sprawling. The world spun and went black. When Jess came to, sunlight streamed through a hole in the barn roof, her head throbbing. The place was ransacked, tools scattered, doors hanging open, feed buckets spilled everywhere. She staggered to her feet, dizzy and desperate. "Lila! Tempest!" she croaked, but only silence answered. Outside, fresh tire tracks tore up the yard. Panic set in as Jess realized the awful truth. Lila and Tempest were gone. The envelope, the necklace, everything. She stumbled into the kitchen, clutching her bruised head, and called for help. But the line was dead. Cut. Victor and Tony had thought of everything. Rage and guilt crashed over Jess. She'd promised Lila safety, and now both girl and horse were lost. snatched by men who wanted nothing but power and control. But as she searched the wreckage, Jess's anger turned cold and sharp. On the ground, she found the broken collar, its insides gutted, the tiny GPS chip gleaming in the dust. Jess knelt, jaw set, determination hardening inside her like steel. They'd underestimated her. Maybe they thought she was beaten. They were wrong. Jess cleaned her wounds, patched up the worst of her injuries, and started gathering supplies. There would be no sleep tonight. This wasn't just about debt or old grudges anymore. Lila and Tempest were counting on her, and Jess was done hiding. She looked out across the battered ranch, her home, her sanctuary, now violated by men who believed violence was power. But Jess knew something they never would. True strength was getting up after you'd been knocked down. As night fell, Jess made a vow to the moon and the wind. She would bring Lila and Tempest home, no matter what it took. The house felt impossibly empty. Jess stood in the middle of her ransacked kitchen, fists clenched at her sides, breathing hard. The pain in her head was a dull throb, but it faded next to the ache in her chest. Lila and Tempest were gone, and every corner of the ranch echoed with their absence. For a moment, Jess let herself feel it all, the guilt, the rage, the hollow fear. Then she straightened, jaw set. She would not let the darkness win. Jess moved on autopilot, cleaning her wounds, binding her ribs. She found the broken collar and its exposed GPS chip, turning it over in her hands, her mind whirring. Victor and Tony had used every trick, every cruel advantage. But they'd left her alive, and that was their mistake. She stormed out to her battered pickup, barely feeling the ache in her body. There was only one person in this town who might listen: Maria Delgado, the local sheriff. Maria had always been fair, even tough on Jess when she needed it. But she had her own history with Richard's family, a feud that ran back a decade and simmered in every conversation. Jess found Maria at her tiny office on Main Street, nursing a mug of coffee and a stack of paperwork. The sheriff looked up, her sharp eyes taking in Jess's bruises and bloody bandages. "Jesus, Jess. What the hell happened?" Jess slammed the broken collar on the desk, voice raw. "Richard's men. They took Lila and Tempest. They wrecked my home. They're planning something big." Maria's expression shifted from skepticism to steel. "Sit. Start from the beginning." Jess told her everything, holding nothing back, while Lila's desperate arrival, the coded necklace, the inheritance, the men's threats, the wild chase. She showed Maria the broken collar, the GPS chip, Lila's coded notes. As she spoke, Maria's lips thinned, jaw clenched tight. "So Richard's trying to force Lila to give up her inheritance," Maria said, almost to herself. "And his goons have her and the horse now." Jess nodded. "I know where they're going. Or at least I have a hunch." She pointed to the addresses Lila and she had discovered. 3 post office boxes, and a location just outside town. The old Cranford estate, abandoned for years, but still in Richard's family name. Maria's eyes darkened. He'd want somewhere private, somewhere out of sight. The Cranford place makes sense. "Jess, do you realize what's happening? If he forces Lila to marry him or sign over her rights..." Jess's blood went cold. "She'll lose everything her father wanted for her, and God knows what he'd do to her then." Maria pushed to her feet, grabbing her keys. "We don't have time to wait for backup. Richard's father pulled strings in this town for years, but I'm not letting another Monroe girl get steamrolled by their power. I'm coming with you." Jess managed a weak smile. "I never thought I'd see the day." They loaded into Maria's cruiser, lights off, driving the back roads toward the estate. Jess's heart pounded. Memories of her own run-ins with Richard's clan rising up like old scars. She remembered broken promises, bruised pride, the way power could twist a person until they barely recognized themselves. Maria broke the silence. "You sure you're up for this? You look like hell." Jess snorted. "Never been better." Maria grinned, then grew serious. "Jess, you know this isn't just about Lila. You've been hiding for years. Tonight, you fight." Jess looked out the window, watching the shadows streak past. "Maybe I'm tired of hiding. Maybe it's time somebody stood up." The estate appeared out of the night like a bad dream. Overgrown lawns, broken gates, moonlight glinting off shattered windows. In the main house, lights burned in the old ballroom, and parked cars lined the drive. Jess and Maria slipped around the side, boots crunching on gravel. Through the tall windows, they saw a scene that chilled Jess's blood. Lila, pale and trembling, stood in a simple dress beside Richard, who wore a smug grin and a tailored suit. Victor and Tony lingered near the doors, guns holstered but hands never far away. A justice of the peace, probably bought and paid for, stood ready, holding a thick folder of documents. In the shadows, Tempest was tethered, tossing his head and stamping in protest. Jess's fists clenched at her sides. "We have to stop them." Maria nodded, checking her service weapon. "We go in, create a distraction, and get Lila and Tempest clear. I'll handle Victor and Tony. You get the girl." Jess's pulse thrummed. "We do this together." They slipped into the back hallway, moving quietly past storerooms and peeling wallpaper. Jess could hear Richard's voice, slick, persuasive, promising Lila safety if she just signed. Lila's voice wavered, refusing. Jess felt a surge of pride. In the dark, Maria whispered, "Now." They burst through the ballroom doors, guns raised. "Sheriff, step away from the girl," Maria barked, her voice ringing out like thunder. Chaos erupted. Victor lunged at Maria. Tony drew his weapon, but Maria was faster. She pinned Victor, disarming him. Jess dashed for Lila, grabbing her hand. "Come on!" Richard lunged, grabbing Lila's arm, shouting threats. Jess swung hard, knocking him away, her adrenaline overpowering every pain in her body. Lila stumbled, but Jess caught her. Tempest reared, breaking free of his tether, hooves crashing down inches from Tony. The guests scattered in panic. Sirens wailed in the distance. Maria had called for backup after all. Jess shoved Lila toward the door. "Run, now!" They sprinted for the exit, Tempest thundering behind. Maria dragged Victor and Tony to the ground, cuffing them as police cars screamed up the drive. The old house filled with shouts, the thud of boots, and the sharp snap of handcuffs. Outside, Jess and Lila collapsed against the fence, Tempest circling protectively. Lila sobbed, clinging to Jess. Maria emerged, breathless, grinning. "You did good, Jess." Jess pulled Lila close, heart pounding, adrenaline ebbing into relief. The nightmare wasn't over, but for the first time they'd turned and fought back. Under the moonlight, with Tempest nudging her shoulder and Maria's hand steady on her back, Jess realized the truth. This fight wasn't just about debts or inheritance. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter how hard or how hopeless it seemed. She looked at Lila, battered but alive, and felt something deep inside begin to heal. The chaos in the Cranford estate erupted the moment Maria's voice echoed through the old ballroom. Chairs toppled, a vase shattered on the marble floor, and the carefully staged ceremony dissolved into panic. Richard, his hand still clutching Lila's wrist, spun around, fury twisting his features as he recognized Jess and the sheriff at the doors. "You think you can walk in here and ruin everything?" he spat, yanking Lila back toward the altar. Jess didn't hesitate. She darted forward, shouldering through the scattering crowd, every muscle in her body screaming from old wounds and new bruises. Maria, weapon drawn and voice steady, blocked Victor and Tony's advance, her badge flashing in the candlelight. "Step away, all of you," Maria commanded, not a hint of doubt in her voice. The justice of the peace shrank behind a pillar, mumbling excuses as Richard's carefully paid witnesses fled toward the exits. Lila's eyes found Jess's, terror and hope mixing in a single desperate look. "Jess!" Jess reached for her, only to have Richard shove her back with surprising force. "She's mine now," Richard snarled, breath hot with rage. "She has something that belongs to me." "You can't own people, Richard," Jess gritted, standing her ground. "It's over." Richard sneered. "It'll be over when she gives me the code." In the confusion, Tony tried to circle behind Jess, hand reaching for his holster, but Maria was quicker. A single warning shot cracked overhead, sending a chandelier swaying and freezing everyone in place. "Nobody moves!" Maria barked. Tempest's shrill scream echoed from outside the windows. He'd broken his lead, sensing Lila's distress. The stallion charged through the side door, his coat flashing black and silver in the moonlight, scattering a few bystanders who tried to block his way. The floorboards trembled as he reared, hooves striking sparks on stone. In the confusion, Richard lost his grip on Lila. She staggered toward Jess, and Jess caught her in a fierce embrace. "Go now! Get on him!" Jess pushed Lila toward Tempest, who knelt low, trained by years of secret signals with her father. Lila swung onto his back, heart racing, fingers clutching the horse's mane. Richard, red-faced and wild, lunged at Jess, but she sidestepped, sending him crashing into a row of overturned chairs. Maria handcuffed Victor with a fluid, practiced motion, and leveled her gun at Tony, forcing him to his knees. The crowd shrank away, some filming the chaos with their phones. In that blur of panic, Jess saw her chance. "Lila, ride! Get out!" Jess shouted, sprinting for the open doorway. Tempest surged forward, Lila clutching his neck as they burst into the garden. Spotlights swung their way, security men shouting, but the horse outran them all, hooves thundering over the manicured lawns. Jess followed on foot, lungs burning, heart in her throat. Inside the ballroom, Maria's radio crackled. Backup had arrived. Uniformed officers flooded in, quickly subduing Tony and corralling Richard, who shouted threats and wild accusations. "You'll regret this, Maria. That girl's a thief. She stole from me." Maria ignored him, her eyes on Jess as she ran past, breathless but triumphant. "Get her to safety," Maria called. Out in the night, Jess vaulted the garden fence, barely pausing as she caught sight of Tempest streaking toward the tree line. Lila held on tight, tears streaming down her cheeks. Laughter and sobs tangled together. Jess caught up, grabbing Tempest's bridle, and together they vanished into the cover of the dark woods beyond the estate. They rode for what felt like hours, the night air cool against their faces, the threat of pursuit dogging their heels. Finally, when the lights of the estate had faded and only the stars watched, they slowed. Jess helped Lila slide down, both of them collapsing to the ground beside Tempest, who dropped his head to graze, unbothered by the adrenaline and terror that still hummed in the human hearts beside him. For a while they said nothing. The world was hushed, broken only by Tempest's steady breathing and the distant echo of sirens. Then Lila pulled the envelope from her jacket, the one she'd recovered from the post office box. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a simple letter from her father, instructions on how to access the bank account where the inheritance was hidden, and a list of names. Lawyers, advocates, people her father had trusted to protect her. It was everything she'd needed to secure her future and expose Richard's crimes. Jess smiled, relief loosening the knot in her chest. "You did it, kid. Your father would be proud." Lila shook her head, wiping tears away. "We did it. I couldn't have made it without you or Tempest." They returned, cautious, to the edge of town by dawn, met by Maria's patrol car. The sheriff, hair mussed and uniform smudged, grinned wide as she waved them over. "Richard's under arrest. The press is all over it. Your code cracked the case wide open, Lila. His accounts, his threats, the bribes, it's all out in the open now. He won't be hurting anyone else for a long, long time." Lila hugged Jess, the weight finally sliding from her shoulders. "It's over, isn't it?" Jess squeezed her back, holding her tight. "It's just the beginning." Tempest nickered, pressing his nose against Jess's arm. The three stood together in the dawn light, bruised but unbeaten, survivors of a night that would be whispered about in town for years to come. And somewhere in the stillness, Jess realized she'd found something more than justice or revenge. She'd found hope, a wild, untamable thing, as fierce as the stallion who'd brought Lila to her door, as steady as the bond forged in the darkest of nights. The sun rose warm and golden on Jess's battered ranch, painting everything with the gentle promise of a new beginning. For the first time in years, the place didn't feel haunted by regrets or threats. Instead, it pulsed with the energy of hope, fresh, raw, and a little bit overwhelming. Lila and Jess stood shoulder to shoulder by the old fence, watching Tempest graze contentedly in the field, the scars on his hide now fading beneath his glossy black coat. A few weeks had passed since the storm at the Cranford estate, but the rush of freedom still felt new, like a secret gift they were both afraid to touch too quickly. Jess's home was changed, not just by repairs, but by the people who had come to help. Maria was there almost daily, hauling lumber, organizing volunteers, making sure the last of Richard's cronies knew better than to show their faces. The police reports and news coverage had painted Jess and Lila as local heroes, and for once, the town's attention felt like a blanket instead of a spotlight. There was laughter in the air, tools clanking and hammers pounding, the sound of things being put back together. Every wall patched, every window replaced, was a step away from fear and a step toward something Jess never thought she'd find again: community. Lila moved through these days with a quiet awe, learning how to breathe without looking over her shoulder. She helped where she could, repainting the barn doors, stacking hay, brushing Tempest until his mane gleamed. She still wore her father's necklace tucked under her shirt, but it was no longer a weight pulling her down. It was a reminder that she had survived, that she could choose what came next. One morning, she found Jess in the kitchen, elbows deep in paperwork, bills and plans spread across the table. "Are you really doing it?" Lila asked, peeking at the stack of forms. Jess glanced up, a rare, real smile tugging at her lips. "Yeah, we're making it official. The ranch is going nonprofit. Sanctuary status, meaning we can take in abused animals, run riding therapy for kids, maybe even set up a shelter for folks trying to get back on their feet." Lila's eyes shone. "You're amazing, Jess. You didn't have to." Jess shook her head, cutting her off. "It's not just me. It's you, Tempest, Maria, and everyone else who stepped up. This place gave me a second chance when I needed it most. Now it's our turn to pay it forward." Word spread fast. Donations trickled in. Feed stores dropped off grain. Neighbors offered their time and skills, and kids from the high school arrived with paintbrushes and big ideas. Lila found herself swept up in the current, her days busy but full of purpose. She was still healing. There were nights when nightmares snuck in, when she'd wake gasping from dreams of Richard's grip or Victor's cold sneer. But Jess was always there, steady and unflinching, a presence as grounding as the earth itself. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight bled orange across the sky, Jess called everyone together in the barn. Maria stood in the doorway, arms crossed but smiling. A handful of volunteers gathered, and Lila leaned against Tempest, her hand in his thick mane. Jess cleared her throat. Most of you know what happened here. Some of you lived it with us. I don't have fancy words, but I want to say thank you. You saved this ranch, and you saved me more than I can ever say. The group shifted, a few folks wiping at their eyes. Jess continued, "This place has always been for the outsiders, the broken horses, the scared kids, people with nowhere else to go. I ran from the world for a long time, but I'm done running. We're going to turn this ranch into a real sanctuary, a place for second chances, for anyone and anything that needs one." The barn erupted in cheers and laughter. Lila felt her chest ache, not from fear, but from something warm and right. She looked at Jess and saw not just a savior, but a friend, a partner, maybe even family. After the meeting, Lila walked out to the paddock, the stars blinking awake overhead. Tempest followed, nuzzling her shoulder. She thought about her father, about his faith in her, his love, and the way he'd set everything in motion to give her this chance at a new life. She touched the necklace and whispered, "Thank you, Dad. I'm safe now. I'm really safe." The next weeks were a blur of activity. Jess and Lila took in their first rescues. A battered pit bull with old scars and sad eyes, a pair of skittish ponies from an auction, a teenage girl named Allie who'd aged out of foster care and needed a roof and a reason to hope. Lila and Allie shared stories under the stars, both learning that scars could be worn as proof, not of weakness, but of survival. The ranch bloomed, not just with new fences and gardens, but with laughter, shared meals, and the noisy love of people and animals healing together. Maria came by on weekends, helping Jess with paperwork and teaching Allie how to drive the old tractor. Jess's old life, the debts, the loneliness, the weight of mistakes, receded with every sunrise. One evening, Jess stood by the fence with Lila, watching Tempest play in the field. "You know," Jess said quietly, "I spent years thinking family was something you lost, something you had to earn back. But maybe family's just the people who stand with you when things get bad, and who stick around when they get better." Lila nodded, tears in her eyes, but this time they were happy. "We're family now, Jess. All of us." Jess smiled, wrapping an arm around Lila's shoulders as Tempest trotted over, nudging them both. The ranch felt like home at last, a place where broken things were mended, where the past was honored but no longer in charge of their future. As darkness fell, laughter echoed from the barn, and for the first time in her life, Lila didn't flinch at the sound. She let herself believe in hope, in healing, and in the messy, beautiful promise of new beginnings. The ranch grew quieter as summer ripened, golden afternoons slipping into cool, star-washed nights. The new sanctuary was up and running, battered ponies, wide-eyed rescue dogs, and a few lost souls seeking refuge. For Jess, it felt like her world had expanded overnight, each day a little brighter, a little fuller. But even as the chores multiplied and hope blossomed, Jess knew there was something more important taking root. The idea of family, not defined by birth or blood, but by the choices they made and the loyalty they showed. One evening, Jess sat on the porch, legs stretched out, Tempest grazing lazily just beyond the railing. Lila joined her, a mug of cocoa warming her hands, eyes soft as she watched the barn lights flicker against the dark. The gentle hush between them was comfortable now. Gone were the days of fear and suspicion. In their place was a steady trust, forged in hardship and tested by fire. Jess broke the silence, her voice carrying a quiet weight. I used to think family was something you were born into, that it was set in stone no matter what. She looked at Lila, a smile twitching at the corners of her mouth. Turns out, I was wrong. Family's not blood. It's the people who stand beside you when the storm comes, and who don't walk away when the sky clears. Lila nodded, tracing the rim of her mug. All my life I wanted to belong. After my dad died, I thought I was alone. Richard made sure of that. But you showed me it's about loyalty, not last names. You fought for me when you didn't have to. Tempest never left my side, even when he was scared. That's what family is. It's a choice. Jess remembered the girl who'd arrived at her gate, bruised and terrified, clutching that coded necklace as if it were the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. Now she saw a young woman growing stronger by the day, learning to laugh again, to trust, to love. Jess felt her own heart mend in ways she'd never thought possible. As the sun dipped lower, Allie joined them, flopping onto the porch steps. She glanced at Jess, then Lila, then out at Tempest, who whinnied a lazy hello. You know, Allie said, I never thought I'd stay in one place this long. Foster homes, group homes. I always figured people would get tired of me, but here, nobody's left. Jess reached over, squeezing Allie's hand. You belong here, both of you. The words lingered in the air, a promise stronger than any legal document. For Lila, they meant safety, a chance to finally put down roots. For Allie, they meant trust, the slow rebuilding of something fragile but enduring. For Jess, they meant redemption, proof that she could build something good out of the broken pieces of her past. The ranch became more than a sanctuary for animals. It became a beacon for those needing a second chance. Lila, inspired by her own journey, started a small group for young women at the local library, sharing her story, listening to theirs, encouraging them to believe that survival was only the beginning. She told them, You're stronger than you know. Real strength isn't about fighting alone. It's about choosing to love, to protect, to let yourself hope. Tempest, the stallion who had once been a symbol of chaos and danger, was now the sanctuary's gentle giant. Children clambered onto his back, giggling as he carried them patiently around the paddock. His presence comforted the nervous rescues and brought a sense of awe to visitors. For Lila, Tempest was the bridge between her old life and her new one, a living reminder that loyalty, courage, and a wild heart could outlast even the darkest nights. Jess watched it all, marveling at how quickly everything had changed. She wasn't naive. She knew the world outside the ranch was still harsh. There were still debts to pay, both literal and emotional. But she saw how kindness, given freely, could change the trajectory of a life. She saw how people, when offered a hand instead of a closed door, could find their own strength. One afternoon, Jess sat with Maria under the shade of a sprawling oak. They talked about the case, about Richard's trial, how the community had rallied behind Lila, how the evidence uncovered by the coded necklace and Jess's testimony had brought Richard's empire crashing down. There was talk of starting a scholarship for girls in the county, of creating more spaces where people like Lila and Allie could find their footing. Maria looked at Jess, her gaze approving. You did good, Jess. You saved more than just that girl. You changed this whole town. Jess shrugged, but her eyes shone. I just did what I had to, what anyone would, if they had the chance. Maria shook her head. Not everyone would. That's the difference. That night, as dusk settled, Lila stood before a group of teenagers in the barn, Tempest at her side. She spoke not as a victim, but as a survivor, sharing the lesson she'd learned the hard way. You don't get to choose where you start. You do get to choose who you trust, who you stand beside. Real family is built on loyalty and sacrifice, not blood. Sometimes the family you make is the one that saves you. Jess listened from the doorway, heart swelling with pride. She saw herself, years younger, wishing for a second chance, and realized she'd found it. Not through running, but through standing still, reaching out, and letting herself care. As the stars blinked awake overhead, the ranch echoed with laughter and hope. Jess knew there would still be hard days, but she also knew she would never face them alone again. Family, she thought, is built every day, in the choices we make, the promises we keep, and the love we refuse to give up on, no matter how rough the road. The months that followed brought a steady, peaceful rhythm to Jess's ranch. What was once a patchwork of half-mended fences and silent wounds had become a sanctuary in the truest sense. Animals healed. People did too. And through it all, Jess found herself, for the first time in her adult life, living with a sense of purpose that didn't hinge on escape or survival. On the porch in the early fall, Jess sat with a warm mug, the sunrise painting the paddocks in soft gold. She watched as Allie and Lila, side by side, led a group of shy children out to meet Tempest. The stallion stood still, a patient sentinel, lowering his great head so the smallest hands could reach. The children laughed, shrieked, and even the most timid ones found themselves smiling, emboldened by Tempest's gentle nature. Lila looked back toward the house, catching Jess's eye. She grinned, waving her hand, a signal that said, "See, we made it." Jess smiled in return, a wave of gratitude washing over her. Every bruise, every sleepless night, every desperate gamble had led to this. That afternoon, as the sun climbed high, Maria pulled up in her cruiser. She joined Jess in the barn, watching the animals settle for the evening. "Heard you got another donation," Maria said, nodding at a stack of feed bags by the door. Jess shrugged with a little laugh. "Word gets around, I guess. This place used to be invisible. Now people want to help. Feels strange, but good." Maria leaned against a stall, her expression serious. "You know, you could have sold this place, started over somewhere else. Why stay?" Jess ran her hand along Tempest's neck. "Because running was all I ever knew. I thought that was the only way to survive. But you can't build anything that way. Not really. Lila, Allie, the horses, they showed me that. Sometimes you don't choose the fight chooses you. But it's who you stand beside that shapes what you leave behind." Maria nodded, the words sitting heavy between them. "A legacy. That's what you're building here." The following week, Jess hosted an open day for the sanctuary. Families came from all over the county. Farmers, teachers, and townsfolk who'd once whispered about the strange, stubborn horsewoman out on the edge of town. Now they brought their children, their neighbors, their donations. Lila organized games in the paddock. Allie led a storytelling circle in the barn. And Jess took every opportunity to shake hands, offer tours, and remind people why second chances mattered. In the late afternoon, as the last of the guests lingered, Jess called everyone together. She stood atop the porch steps, the ranch's new sign gleaming behind her, Tempest's Haven, sanctuary for animals and people. With Lila and Allie on either side, she looked out at the crowd, a sea of faces, some familiar, some new, all touched in some way by the story that had unfolded here. Jess took a breath, voice steady. "Most of you know how this all started. Not so long ago, I was ready to lose this place. I'd lost my way, lost my hope. But when Lila and Tempest showed up, running for their lives, I had a choice. Look away, or stand up and fight. I learned that sometimes the world gives you a burden, not because you deserve it, but because you're strong enough to carry it. And you never carry it alone. She paused, catching eyes in the crowd, letting the lesson settle. This sanctuary isn't just about animals. It's about people. It's about giving a safe place to anyone who needs it, no matter their story. It's about loyalty and kindness, and the courage to begin again. If you take anything from our story, let it be this. Stand up for each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The applause was thunderous, echoing across the fields. Jess stepped down, heart full, knowing the ranch's legacy would live on in every life it touched. Later, as the sky turned indigo, Lila and Jess walked the fence line together. Lila's hand drifted to the necklace she still wore, a memento of her father, of the mystery and pain that had once defined her. But now, it felt like a symbol of survival and the wisdom gained from every scar. She looked up at Jess. Do you ever wonder what your legacy will be? Jess thought for a long moment, then smiled. Not so much anymore. I think about who I stood up for, who I stood beside. That's enough. The rest is just details. Lila nodded, understanding. I want to help girls like me, people who are scared, who don't know where to turn. I want to tell them they're not alone. Jess hugged her. That's the kind of legacy that matters, Lila. That's how we change the world. As the sanctuary lights glowed warm against the night, Jess took a seat on the porch, reflecting. She thought of the battles fought and won, the friends gained, the family built not from blood, but from shared struggle and hard-won trust. She understood at last. Real courage wasn't just about facing down villains or fighting for what was yours. It was about refusing to give up on people. Even when the world told you to walk away, she turned to the camera that Maria set up for a quick interview, her voice low and sincere. Sometimes you don't choose the fight. The fight chooses you. But what really matters is who you stand beside, who you protect, who you love. That's what shapes your legacy. That's what lasts. Jess looked out into the night, the sanctuary alive with the gentle sounds of hope. She smiled, challenging the audience in a way that felt like an invitation and a promise. So who would you stand up for, even if the world doubted you? She paused, letting the words hang, then added with a wink. And if you want to hear more true stories of hope and resilience, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's always another chapter. Tempest nickered in the distance. Lila and Allie laughed in the barn. And the world, for the first time in a long while, felt exactly as it should be. A place where second chances weren't just possible, but celebrated.